So just a reminder of where we stand. The people stand on the brink of entering the promised land. What we've looked at for weeks and weeks are a series of laws that will apply once they get in, and which made up a good part of the book of Deuteronomy, but now we're leaving that behind. Last week, we read of the rituals that will be performed as the people enter the land. All of this because this is God's land. They are becoming God's people. And so you may remember that a series of stones are set up at the entrance to the land. Sacrifices are made, and a covenant, a renewal of the covenant is taking place. Last week, we also saw at the end a series of curses which were to be pronounced over specific acts. If a person does this, and if a person does that, and all of those actions had to do with things that were being done in secret, where people would not know about it, and as a result, a person couldn't be held to account. And so these curses were, in a sense, invoking God to punish the people who would do things in secret. And just to go back for a minute to things that might not come out, some of it's very specific. For example, someone who makes an idol and sets it up in secret. Someone who moves a landmark, and a person who misdirects a blind person, a person who subverts the rights of the widow, people who commit incest, a host of different kinds of things that people could do without the community becoming aware of it. And so in a sense, it's a way of invoking God because the community needs to be protected, because allowing sin to take place unchecked will bring God's wrath down upon them. Now, what we're going to see now is really the contents of a series of blessings and curses which were performed, which were to be performed just after the people entered the promised land. So the land of Israel. So what would happen, and you may recall this from last time, is that there are two tall mountains, Mount Gerizim, Mount Ebal. 6 tribes would stand on one, 6 tribes on the other, and these curses would be, and blessings would be pronounced. Now we're going to see today the curses and the blessings. The blessings are few. The curses seem endless, and they are utterly horrific and in great detail. So previously, we had some specific actions and said, cursed be those who did these. Now we're not going to have a big description of actions, but only the consequences of violating this covenant which the people are making with God. We're going to move through this pretty quickly. There's not a lot to say. I'll read it. It's very descriptive. But we are closing in now on the end of the book of Deuteronomy. And we will move really quite fast. After this, there are really 2 short parshiot left in the book. And so, looking ahead, assuming we finish the curses and the blessings today, my guess, and then we'll take a break. And when we come back, maybe 2 weeks, and we'll finish the book. And then we'll begin the book of Joshua, just giving you a sense of where we're going. The other thing is that I think it's important to think about these blessings and particularly the curses in context. Now, the context is that Moses knows he's going to die, and the people are about to enter the land without his leadership, and without his ability to protect them. And I say that because Moses is the one who, throughout his career as the leader of Israel, was the one who stood in the breach between God and the people. And when God was angry and threatened to wipe them out, again and again, Moses stood up and made arguments on behalf of the people. He will not be there. And so I think that part of what's motivating, if we want to look at this in personal terms, part of what's motivating Moses here is that sense that he will no longer be able to control the destiny of this people. He won't be there to defend them. And so what he is going to do now is talk about their obedience, not to a specific law, but to the covenant as a whole, promise them that they will have incredible blessings if they adhere to it. And then he really tries to scare them straight, promising horrific and awful things that will come. We'll look at the blessings first. We are chapter 28 in the Eitz Chaim. We're on page 1148. And we get if then. Now, if you will obey the Lord your God and faithfully observe his commandments, which I enjoin you today. And enjoin is really command here. Mitzavcha, I command you. And the other root, of course, here is the word mitzvah or mitzvot, right? A mitzvah is not just a good deed. A mitzvah is a divine commandment. Now, Moses says that he is commanding the people, but it's clear that he is speaking in God's name. So when he says that I command you, he means that God commands it. And we're going to see that in a few minutes, really in a very specific and perhaps even dramatic way. Okay, so if you observe, the Lord your God will set you high above the nations of the earth, right? So they will rule the rest of the world. And these blessings will come upon you and take effect. The word come upon you here, hisigucha. There's a sense of being unleashed. In other words, God will either unleash blessings or curses, right? There is a sense that these things, these blessings and curses, have a kind of physicality to them, a reality to them. The same kind of language is used in the 10th plague. God sort of unleashes that, the destroyer who will go into Egypt and bring about the death of the firstborn. There is this sense that these are independent forces that God can dole out or keep in check. So if you obey, this is what will happen. And we're going to get a series of them. Baruch atah ba'ir, baruch atah b'tzadeh. Right. Blessed are you in the city, and blessed are you in the country. And so here what we have is a kind of saying, you'll be blessed everywhere, right? Whether you're in the city, whether you're in the country, wherever you go. This reminds us a little bit of what it says in the Shema, right? When you're when you're at home and when you're by the way, right? There too, we're talking about a sort of totality that we think about the Shema and God's words and teaching them. We do it when we're at home and when we're out. In other words, all the time. Here, your blessings will be everywhere. And now we're going to get a series of statements about fertility. Blessed be the issue of your womb, the produce of your soil, the offspring of your cattle, the calving of your herd, the lambing of your flock, right? So we get a long, not a long, but a list of all kinds of bounty. Everything is going to go great. You'll have wealth. There's also a sense in the earlier blessing when it says, blessed you'll be in the city and that you'll be in the country, you'll be protected. You're going to have affluence and wealth. You're going to be a leading nation. You're going to be protected. And then here we again get sort of short phrases. Blessed would be your basket, and blessed be your kneading bowl. And these two things are kind of emblematic. Basket really is something more than that. It's like a silo. It's a place where food is collected, right? That your harvests will be plentiful, and your gathering it in will be blessed. And then the kneading bowl is emblematic of the food itself. And here we get again, just as we said, blessed are you in the city and blessed are you in the country. Now we get blessed are you in your comings and blessed are you in your goings. And these seem very formulaic, and they're short phrases. Baruch atah bevoecha, ubaruch atah b'tzeitchesa. Right? Baruch atah ba'ir, ubaruch atah b'sadeh. Right? You feel the kind of rhythm of it. Okay. And now we get some more specifics again. The Lord will put to rout before you the enemies who attack you. They will march out against you by a single road, but flee from you by many roads, right? So the sense here is God is going to protect you. Your enemies will fall before you. It's actually not it's not many roads, literally it's 7 roads, but it's emblematic of being many. And the idea is your enemies will be scattered, right? They're going to run away. They may come in a formation as one army, but they will be completely defeated and routed, and they will go scattered away. This is very similar to a phrase that we have in the book of Numbers, and we actually use it is part of the prayer service, right? Arise, O Lord, and Yafutsu oivecha milfanecha, right? Scatter your enemies before you. This is when we take out the Torah, right? And we refer Vayehi bin so Aaron v'yomer Moshe, right? And it was when the ark went out, they're thinking of the military ark in the wilderness, so people go into battle and they call upon God in that battle to scatter their enemies. So here, this is the same kind of image. Your enemies will be scattered. And then we again get blessings here. This is in your barns. That is where your grain is stored. All your undertakings. The Lord will bless you in the land that the Lord is giving you. The Lord will establish you as his people, as he swore to you. But when? If you keep the commandments of the Lord your God and walk in his ways. And if you do that, you'll have all this prosperity and more. The people of the earth will see that the Lord's name is proclaimed over you, and they will stand in fear of you. And this idea that God's name is somehow proclaimed over them, they are the people of God. You'll be enormously prosperous. They'll understand that you have divine protection, and they won't try to attack you. Just the opposite. They will fear you. So we have here safety, prosperity, renown, all kinds of good things. The Lord will give you abounding prosperity in the issue of your womb, the offspring of your cattle, the produce of your soil, in the land that the Lord swore to your fathers to assign you. The Lord will open for you his bounteous store, the heavens to provide rain for your land in season, and bless all your undertakings, right? So you're going to have tremendous prosperity. Don't worry about famine. Don't worry about drought. You keep this covenant, everything will work well. And not only will you have rain, but you'll have rain in its season. And this is important because if you get rain at the wrong time, it can destroy your crops, right? So you need just the right rain at just the right time. Don't worry about it. God will bless everything. And you will be so wealthy that other nations will come to you. You'll be a creditor to nations, but not a debtor. Right? So as individuals and as people, they will be unsurpassed. All of that, if you keep my covenant. And here we get another expression: the Lord will make you the head and not the tail. You'll always be on the top and never on the bottom. It's an interesting expression, right? That you will be the head and not the tail. The Natancha Adonai l'rosh v'lo l'zanav. So you may know, well, I think we all know about apples and honey on Rosh Hashanah, right? Well, we serve apples and honey, and there's a little phrase, right? We eat the apples and honey, may it be your will that we will have a sweet year, right? Shana tova umituka, a good year, a sweet year. That is only part of a larger ceremony in which a variety of foods are used, and there's an expression about each one. It's called, and this you'll see in the Sephardic community, and some Ashkenazic Jews also, and I'll tell you why I'm mentioning this in a minute, but often the foods are, there's a kind of linguistic pun that's used. So the tradition to eat carrots, right? You may know the word carrot in Hebrew is gezer, right? And so the word gezer also means a decree. So you eat carrots and you say, and may you annul the evil decree that would be against us because we've sinned, right? So it's a series of different foods. And there is a tradition to eat the head of a calf, right? And to say, may we be the head and not the tail. So this expression, which we see here, becomes a part of this ritual. Okay. Then it says, all this will happen if only you obey, faithfully observe the commandments of the Lord your God that I enjoin you today. Don't deviate to the left or to the right from any of these commandments, and turn to worship other gods. So the image is stay on the path. Shouldn't go to the left, shouldn't go to the right, keep down the middle. And I think it's worth noting that this, of course, is the covenant. People are binding themselves to follow God's commandments. And the Hebrew word for law, for the commandments, is halakha, from pathway. You might know there's this Buddhist idea of the path, Tao. Right? It's the same idea, that you have a path that you're prescribed to follow. And if we think of this metaphor in literal terms, then you shouldn't turn left or turn right. And just to take this a step further, what do we call it when you step off the path? One of the words for sin is avera. And avera, sometimes you'll hear people say in this sort of Yiddishized Hebrew, do an Avera. You don't want to do an Avera, you want to do a mitzvah, right? So la'avor means to pass off, right? To go outside. In other words, you're supposed to stay on the derech, on the halacha, and not la'avor, and not pass out of the path to the left or to the right. At any rate, all of this is going to be great. Just keep the covenant, don't worship other gods, and it'll be magnificent. In a moment, we're going to see the consequences of not doing it. Before we do, I just pause for a minute. If there are any questions about these blessings, they're pretty straightforward, but if anything hits anyone, you want to make a comment or ask a question. Yeah, Barry. You have to unmute.
Yeah. So the last line speaks about not following other gods.
Yes.
Which so is there a sense that these are false gods?
Yes.
Or is there a sense that so is this, are we talking about
Yes.
really a polytheism? It's not clear. Or is the gods of the Hebrews just more powerful than the other gods?
So that's a great question. I think that the Israelites, particularly here in the book of Deuteronomy, see idols. I'm not talking about the gods themselves, but idols as fetishes, right? They're the work of man's hands, right? You made it, how can you worship it, right? The idols themselves are not viewed as having any power in them. But the idol and the gods are not identical. So in general, in idolatry, the way it worked was that you would construct an idol, and then you would do a ritual, and the god would enter the idol and be present there. There's a term, we know it from archaeology, that you open the mouth of the idol, and there's a ritual. And then the god, whether it's Baal or Ashtart or some other deity, now is resident there. Not only there, but in other places also where there's another idol. There's a sense that an aspect of the god, right? That the god can sort of divide itself and be present, physically present in various places. And that's why you're going to feed the god. You'll put food there and so on, right? So that idea that the god is somehow present there is certainly not something that Deuteronomy takes seriously. But the idea of worshiping another god, that other gods have some power, there's a sense that God has, in a sense, all the power, but God has delegated, has appointed gods for the other peoples to worship. God, the true God, the most powerful God, the high God, is the God of Israel. The idea that there are no other gods, just the God of Israel, it does not seem to be present in the book of Deuteronomy. It's a later idea. We see it in Judaism very profoundly, but here the idea is you're not allowed to worship them, right? You've made a covenant with the true God, the only real God, the one who created the heaven and the earth, right? And it may be that there are other powers under the control of the true God, right? But it's not saying they don't exist. But they're idols, right, they're meaningless. They're nothing. Okay, any other questions or comments about this? Yeah, Saul.
Yeah, it's interesting. This relates very much to the beginning of Kitavo. The word hatena, it's very similar to the beginning of what Kohen
Ah, that's
hatena miyodecha. Okay.
yeah, that's nice. I hadn't seen that. So we talk about your basket, right? And at the beginning of the parsha, we have this ritual. Once you come into the land, you will bring the first fruits in a basket, right? Symbolic of bounty. That's very nice, because why this metaphor, right? Why, in these blessings, why use the metaphor of your basket and your kneading, right? So it does connect back. Thanks for that. I think that's really good, actually. Any other comments, insights? Okay, so now we're gonna go in the other direction and prepare yourself. All right, so the blessings are relatively brief. Looking back, we're starting we've had 14 verses of blessings. Now we're going to have 50 or 60, I don't remember the exact number, of curses. And they'll be divided into 3 groups. They're somewhat repetitive. They're really horrific. So I'm going to read, I should mention also traditions about reading this in synagogue as part of the Torah reading on Shabbos morning. This whole section is known as the Tochecha. Tochecha is an admonition. There are actually 2. There's one in Leviticus also, but it's much shorter. At any rate, the tradition is only this whole thing, which goes on and on and on, is read as one aliyah. Right? It starts with the blessings at the beginning, and then it's all the curses, and then a little bit more. So you don't begin or end on a word of curse. So it's really, you get this aliyah, you're standing up there for 15 minutes, assuming it's a good Torah. If it's not a good Torah reader, you could be there for a very long time. Now, the other thing is that there's a kind of superstition about this. People don't want to be there. You don't want to stand there while all these curses are being pronounced over you. So in some communities, the rabbi has the honor of getting this aliyah, sort of taking it upon himself or herself. In other communities, people aren't so, but there are people who definitely don't want this aliyah. And then the last thing I'll say about it, when it's read very quickly, and it's read almost in a whisper. You don't want to hear it, it's horrible. Right? So having given you that sort of preface, let's see. If you do not, right, if you don't listen to God's voice and obey, to observe faithfully all of God's commandments and laws, which I enjoin you this day, these curses will come upon you and take effect, right? So the laws we're talking about, first, we're talking about the covenant, but it's also all those laws that we study. Right, that whole code in the book of Deuteronomy, which in some ways, going all the way back to the 10 Commandments, all the legislation that follows, all of this is the specific content of the people's obligations to God under this covenant. And we're not going to list them. There isn't a sense. Remember that I said that when entering the land, there's this statement, cursed be he who does this, and cursed be he who does that, things that are done in secret. And it's specific. Here, you break the law, watch out. Okay, and it starts sort of the way the blessing started. Cursed be you in the city, cursed be you in the country, cursed be your basket and your kneading bowl, cursed be the issue of your womb, the produce of your soil, the calving of your herd, the lambing of your flock. Cursed shall you be in your comings, and cursed shall you be in your goings. Right? So the opposite. Would that it stopped there, but no chance. Okay, so the Lord will let loose against you, right? These again are personified forces. They're going to be unleashed. And what are you going to get? Calamity, panic, and frustration in everything that you do. And it's worth noting that the words here are all prefaced by, in Hebrew, a hey, right? The. So the Lord will let loose against you the calamity, the panic, the frustration. The sense is here, like the destroyer at Pesach that is unleashed, there's something physical and tangible, a being that God is going to send against you, an extension, obviously, of God, but something within God's arsenal that God will unleash. And what will the consequences be? You'll be utterly wiped out because of your evil doing in forsaking me. And remember before I said that Moses is speaking on God's behalf. And here it actually shifts from the third person in the same verse, right? The Lord, God, third person, God will let loose because you forsaked me. Now, obviously, Moses is not talking about himself, right? He's speaking in God's name. We see this kind of duality, this shift from the third person to the second person very clearly, not in something like this, but actually in prayer. It's something that we do when we make a bracha. If you think about, let's say, a blessing over bread, hamotzi, right? So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, blessed are you, right? I'm talking to God. God is being addressed in, second person, you. And then what do? We shift to the third person. The one who, blessed are you, he who brings forth bread from the earth, right? So that kind of shift is taking place here. Not that we identify with God, but here Moses is speaking on God's behalf and shifting from one to the other. Now, God will let loose the calamity, the panic, the frustration, and now here we go. The Lord will make pestilence cling to you until he has put an end to you in the land you are entering to possess. The Lord will strike you with consumption, fever, inflammation, scorching heat, and drought, blight, mildew. They will hound you until you perish. The skies above your head will be copper, and earth beneath you iron. The image here is no rain, right? Copper. And try to dig in that soil, forget it. It's absolutely hard. The Lord will make the rain of your land dust, and everything will dry out. Sand shall drop to you from the sky until you're wiped out. The Lord will put you to rout before your enemies. You will march out against them in a single road, but flee from them in many roads. Exactly the opposite of what we saw in the blessing. And you will become a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth. People, wow, God, your carcasses will become food for the birds of the sky, the beasts of the earth. with none to frighten them off. What could be worse? Not only are you going to die, you're not going to be able to be buried. The Lord will strike you with the Egyptian inflammation, with hemorrhoids, boil scars, itch from which you will never,
Hey,
right? It's pretty terrible. Egyptian inflammation probably boils, and it sort of conjures up the image of the plagues. The sixth plague, boils, right? So in some sense, there is this, just as God plagued the Egyptians, God is plagued you. And we get this also, this sense of itch, constantly being uncomfortable. We also see it in the book of Job. It's one of the things that Job is struck with. And not only that, the Lord will strike you with madness, blindness, dismay. You'll grope at noon as a blind man gropes in the dark. You will not prosper.
verses.
Constantly be abused and robbed, and no one to help you. If you pay the bride price for a wife, right? You try to marry someone, another man shall enjoy it. And the word enjoy here is a bit of a euphemism, probably means rape, right? So you want to marry her, you've actually paid for the right. And if you built a house, you will not live in it. If you plant a vineyard, you won't harvest it. Your ox will be slaughtered before your eyes, but you will not eat of it. Right? Not only will you not have it for the work that it does, you'll see it happen. You'll get no benefit from it. Your ass shall be seized from you, and it shall not be returned to you. This reminds me of something which I know from the Talmud. I don't know that it may be reflected here. There was in Talmudic times something called the Ongaria, or the corvée, and this gave the government the right essentially to seize your animals, to take them, to use them, and ultimately to return them. Right here, they're going to be seized. You'll never get them back. Your flock will be delivered to your enemies with none to help you. Your sons and daughters will be delivered to another people while you look on. Your eyes will strain for them constantly, and you will be helpless. A people you do not know will eat of the produce of your soil, your grains. You will be abused and downtrodden continuously until you are driven mad. The Lord will afflict you at the knees and the thighs with severe inflammation from which you will never recover, from the sole of your foot to the crown of your head. The Lord will drive you and the king you have set over you to a nation unknown to you or your fathers, where you will serve other gods of wood and stone, right? You don't serve me? You don't want to serve me? Fine. You're going to be in exile. They're going to force you to serve other gods. You'll be a consternation, a proverb, a byword among the peoples to whom the Lord will drive you. You'll put much seed and gather little. The locust will consume it. Again, we have these Egyptian plagues. You'll plant vineyards and till them. You'll have no wine. The worm will devour them. You'll have olive trees throughout your territory, but no oil, because the olives will fall off. Though you beget daughters, sons and daughters, they won't remain with you. They'll go into captivity. The cricket will take over the trees and produce of your land. Again, a reminder of an Egyptian plague. The stranger in your midst will rise above you higher and higher. You will seek lower and lower, and you will be their creditor, the reverse of the blessing. But you shall not, you'll be his creditor, he will not be used. He shall be the head, and you will be the tail. And this is now the end of the first of these three groups of curses. All these curses shall befall you. They will pursue you and overtake you until you're wiped out. Why? Because you did not heed the Lord your God and keep the commandments and laws that God has enjoined you. And these commandments and laws will serve as signs and proofs against you and your offspring for all time. And if you look at the Hebrew in verse 46, They will be le'ot u'lemofet, right? This is the same phrase which is used to talk about the plagues in Egypt, signs and wonders. You probably know it from the Passover Haggadah. So here, the signs and wonders that God did in Egypt now are going to be done to you. And here we get this really, I think, one of the most remarkable phrases here. Why will all this happen? You didn't follow my commandments. But even more, I'm going to read this in the Hebrew first. Taka lo avadita et Adonai Elohecha besimcha. So the word simcha, I'm sure you know, right? Joy. Because you did not serve God with joy. It's really a striking thing, right? Because up to now, it seems very dry, legalistic. We have all these laws, got to follow them. Violate the laws, there are consequences. But here there's something else. There's this sense, I mean, part of the way the Torah envisions you to serve God. Right? We probably know the phrase, it comes from the Torah, V'samachta b'chagecha, right? You should rejoice in your festivals. There is a sense that by not following the law, you've turned your back on this great gift that God has given you, this simcha, this joy. And I think it also, there is this idea which is, I'm trying to think of how to translate it. In Hebrew, it's simcha shel mitzvah, the joy of the mitzvah. That the idea of doing a mitzvah should generate in you a sense of joy, satisfaction. And that's the way you should do a mitzvah. And mitzvah here is really a commandment. I guess it's true of a good deed as well, right? And I have to say that and I'm sure you've had this experience too. When you go to a wedding, right? And you come away with this sense of joy. Go to a shiva house. And of course it's very sad. But also you come away with, I wouldn't call it joy, but a sense that you've had a meaningful connection, that you've been there for someone in a difficult time, right? It sort of fills you up, right? And so in the midst of all of this is a sense, not just you should be doing the commandments, and not just that if you do the commandments, that you'll have prosperity, wealth, and you'll have, your children will thrive and your animals will thrive, and you'll be the head, not the tail, and other nations will look up to you, all that. But there's something joyous about it. Okay, so what we've got here now, and I think we're going to run out of time, and I'm not going to read it all. I'll read a little bit more of it. We have two more sections. Okay, so where are we? You'll serve those nations in hunger and thirst, naked, lacking everything. The enemy, God will put an iron yoke on your neck until he's wiped you out. The Lord will bring a nation against you from afar, from the ends of the earth, who will swoop down like an eagle. The image here of the eagle, we know also from the Exodus and from the beginning of the passage. We come in the book of Exodus, right before Mount Sinai. There's this reference that God brought us out of Egypt al kanfei nisharim, on the wings of eagles. Here, another nation, right? That was the eagle, as it were, God that supported us. Now, another nation is going to swoop in, a nation whose language we don't understand, right? Not only are they going to conquer you, you can't make your case. You can't even speak to them, right? You just have to suffer. A ruthless nation, show the old no regard, the young no mercy. It'll devour the offspring of your cattle, the produce of your soil, leaving nothing of grain, oil, the calving of your herds, shut you in your towns, and put a wall. The wall that you trusted will come down. And then we get perhaps the most horrific idea that you will eat your own children, right? That you will be so hungry that you will resort to cannibalism. That this siege will go on so long that you will literally be starving and do that which is unspeakable. And it'll go into here. So he who is most tender and fastidious among you shall be too mean to his brother and the wife of his bosom, the children he has spared, to share with them any of the flesh of his children that he eats, because he has nothing left. And she who is most tender and dainty among you, who would never venture to set a foot on the ground, right? She's wealthy, she's carried in a litter, shall begrudge the husband of her bosom and the son of her daughter, the afterbirth that issues from between her legs, the baby that she bears, she'll eat them secretly. She won't, not only will she eat them, she'll hide because she doesn't want to share. This is just unbearable. These kinds of curses, by the way, if you know the liturgy of Tisha B'Av, right, the 9th of Av, we read the book of Eicha, the book of Lamentations, over the destruction of the temple. Some of these same images, what happens during siege and famine, come back in that book, and is probably informed by these passages. So I'm going to jump ahead because I don't want to leave up quite on this note. The parsha ends simply by saying, these are the terms of the covenant that the Lord your God commanded to Moses to conclude with the Israelites in the land of Moab, in addition to the covenant that was made at Horeb, right? Now, one more thing about this. In ancient times, in the ancient Middle East, the idea of a lord or a king who makes a covenant with a vassal, they always had blessings and curses. So this is a particular form that of a berit, of a covenant, not unique to the people of Israel, but in its content, quite unique. And particularly the curses, which, as I've said, really evoke the plagues that were rained down on the Egyptians. And there's a sense, I took you out of this and did all of what I did to the Egyptians for you, and now you've done this to me. I'll do what I did to them to you. Okay, I am sorry to end on such a horrific note. We are leaving them behind, and we'll pick up next time. Before we do, final questions, comments, anything at all? Yeah, Saul.
Yeah, I was looking at Bechukotai, and I noticed that in Bechukotai you have that word Bekeri. You have different vocabulary in the curses in Bechukotai, and also it's in the plural. Here it's in the singular, the second person singular. So there are a lot of variations between that one and this one. I don't know if you have time to go into it next time or not, but
Sure, I'll spend a few minutes on it. Thanks for pointing it out, and I'll take a look at it. it's worth, I mean, they come from different parts of the Torah, right? Modern scholars would suggest that they come from different sources, and therefore the language might be different. But I generally think that though that might be true, there's generally more to it than that. So let me take a look at it. I don't know that I'll have anything meaningful to say about it, but I'll definitely look into it. Anything else that anyone wants to say? Well, I wish you a 2 weeks, because again, we won't meet next week, but 2 weeks of blessings with no curses whatsoever. All right, everybody. See you in 2 weeks. Bye now.